More uncertainty in Donald Trump's busy court schedule. Judge Tanya Chutkan has now officially delayed the start of his federal election interference trial, writing that she'll reschedule if and when Trump's presidential immunity claims are resolved. We're still awaiting a decision on that issue a month after a U.S. appeals court heard arguments. And all of this comes as Trump is gearing up for a big court week with the Supreme Court set to hear his Colorado ballot eligibility case. That happens on Thursday. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner is now joining us with more on all of this. So with Trump's D.C. election subversion case on hold indefinitely, Glenn, right now we heard from Neil Katyal on our air yesterday that he is in the freak-out stage over these delays. What's your take?
I don't know that I'm ready to freak out yet, Anna, but I am concerned because if it turns out that our institutions of government were unable to take Donald Trump to trial for trying to undermine the results of a presidential election, unable to take him to trial in the 4 years between presidential elections, that will be a very sad result. But, you know, there are a couple of dates to look for. There is March 1st, which we haven't heard much about, but that's when the parties will gather together in a courtroom down in Florida, and Judge Cannon will decide whether the May 20th trial in the documents case will stick or will get pushed down the road. And then the other big date coming up, apart from the Supreme Court argument later this week, is March 25th, because that's when Donald Trump's New York prosecution for falsifying business records, to cover up hush money payments, to interfere in the 2016 presidential election is scheduled to begin.
Right. So on that point, if Trump's first trial is this hush money case scheduled to begin on March 25th, are you surprised that that would go to trial first? And will it set the tone then for other trials to come?
You know, I'm not that surprised, because what was the first case that was indicted against the former president? Exactly. It was the hush money case. So it actually makes some chronological sense. The first case to be indicted ends up being the first one to go to trial. But it feels like the stakes are highest, Anna, in the election interference case in D.C. So let's hope once that issue is resolved by the appellate courts, Judge Chutkan can find some daylight in Donald Trump's trial schedule and can drop her case back on his calendar.
Right. And again, it's about presidential immunity. That's what we are waiting a decision on from the appeals court. Of course, he could take it then to the Supreme Court, or either side could. So that could create a further delay. Right now, the Supreme Court will be hearing arguments on Trump's ballot eligibility in Colorado. And those arguments are on Thursday. We're going to have special coverage here on MSNBC. But Glenn, what will you be watching for? And how long might it be before we get a decision in this?
Yeah, great question, especially the latter one, because we could see a fractured Supreme Court with multiple opinions being written ultimately on whether Donald Trump is disqualified or not from the presidential ballot. What I'm really looking for is, gauging the questions that each of the justices pose to the parties, because that will probably give us some indication regarding how each justice is leaning. But, my take on it is, even though the legal authority, the precedent, is pretty overwhelmingly in favor of disqualification, I think the Supreme Court could find any rationale they want to reach any result they want. So, this will be a bit of a cliffhanger.